Welcome to 21st Sports Recap and Reaction for the National Championship game played between the Alabama Crimson Tide and the Clemson Tigers on January 11th, 2016. We're going to go over every possession and the stats and give our breakdown analysis as the number one team versus the number two team, as they had both won their respective playoff games on New Year's Eve, and the Tigers entered this game undefeated, and Alabama had not lost a game since back in September against Ole Miss, and they were looking to hand the Tigers their first loss of this year. And of course, it is 2016, but going back to 2015's regular season in college football. But to start things off in this game, it was some defense early on, although we would end up seeing 75 points scored between these two teams. But on the first possession of the game, Alabama would get up towards midfield, but after 9 plays on the possession, they would punt to Clemson. So Clemson would take over on their own 9-yard line on their first possession of the game, but after 8 plays, they would end up punting from their own 35. So now Alabama would take over on their own 41, and they were faced with a 3rd and 1 from the 50, and that's when Derrick Henry, the Heisman winner, ran it 50 yards for the touchdown. That put the first points on the board. Adam Griffith added the extra point, and it was 7-0 Alabama over Clemson with just under 8 minutes left in the first quarter. Clemson would respond with a scoring drive of their own. A nice return on the kickoff brought them out to the 46, and they would cross into Alabama territory shortly thereafter. And then after converting on a 3rd and 4 from the Alabama 37 with a 6-yard run by Watson, Watson then airs it out to Hunter Renfrow for a 31-yard touchdown. Greg Huegel added the extra point, and this game was tied at 7 apiece, with still over 5 minutes left in the first. So now Bama would start their next possession on their own 39, and then on 3rd and 3 from the 46, Jay Coker hits O.J. Howard for a 25-yard reception. Howard had a huge night, but that would lead to a 1st and 10 at the Clemson 29, but then Shaq Lawson sacks Coker on the very next play, which would push him back to the 35. Henry would pick up 8 yards on 3rd and 16, but on 4th and 8 from the 27, Adam Griffith came out to attempt a 44-yard field goal, but it was no good. So it remained 7-7 with just over 2 minutes still left in the first. Clemson now would take over after the missed field goal on their own 27, and they would end up with a big play. First, on 2nd and 4 from the Clemson 44, Watson going to peak a 24-yard reception that brought it to the Alabama 32, and then Watson goes to Leggett for a 20-yard reception, and now it's first down the red zone at the Alabama 12. Then on 3rd and 9 from the Alabama 11, Deshaun Watson goes to Hunter Renfrow. The second time the two connected for a touchdown. This one on an 11-yard touchdown. Huegel would add the extra point, and now the Tigers were in the lead for the first time in this game, up 14-7 as the first quarter came to a close. So now Alabama would start the second quarter with the ball on their own 25 after the touchback on the kickoff. And on the first play of this possession, Coker airs out to Mullaney. He picks up 29 yards, and it's a first down in Clemson territory at the 46. But then on 2nd and 14, after a 4-yard loss on first down by Henry, Coker gets sacked by Kevin Dodd, and he drops him for a 4-yard loss, and that would make it 3rd and 18. And then they picked up a yard, and so the punting unit came out. And so after 4 plays on the possession, they would punt the ball back to the Tigers. So now Clemson would take over on their own 17-yard line. And on 2nd and 3 from the 24, the second play of the possession, Watson is intercepted by Eddie Jackson. And now Bama had the ball right back and in Clemson territory at the 42. And on 2nd and 4 from the 36, Derrick Henry, a 12-yard run and a face mask penalty against Clemson would make it a first down in the red zone for the Tide at the Clemson 12-yard line. Then on 3rd and 7 from the 9, Jake Coker hits Calvin Ridley for a 7-yard reception. Now it's 1st and goal on the 2. Kenyan Drake runs for a yard, and on 2nd and goal from the 1, Derrick Henry punches it into the end zone for the 1-yard touchdown. His 2nd touchdown of the game. Adam Griffith adds the extra point, and this game is tied at 14 apiece with a little over 9.5 still left to play before halftime. So now Clemson would get the ball at their own 25 after the touchback on the kickoff, but the Tide would hold them to a 3-and-out, and so they would punt the ball on 4th and 2 from the 33, and now Alabama would take over on their own 10-yard line, backed up against their own end zone. And on 3rd and 1 from the 19, Derrick Henry picks up 3 yards and a first down at the 22, but then on 2nd and 5 from the Alabama 27, Coker is sacked once again by Shaq Lawson, dropping him for a 5-yard loss. Coker would pick up 8 yards on the next play, but he was 2 yards shy of the first down, and so out came the punting unit, and Clemson now would take over after the punt on their own 18-yard line. They would pick up a first down, and then they would bring it up towards midfield, actually 2 first downs, but then they would end up with a penalty for an ineligible man downfield that pushed them back. Then after the penalty, a couple of losses on a 5-yard loss on a run by Gallman, then a 3-yard loss. Now it was 3rd and 23, and so they would end up punting on 4th down after a no gain on 3rd down. And now Alabama would take over with less than 2 minutes still left in the first half with the ball on their own 24 after the punt. And on 1st down, Coker is sacked by Kevin Dodd as he sacks him yet again, dropping him for a 9-yard loss, and they would end up going 3-and-out on the possession as they would end up punting the ball back to Clemson now, who would take over on their own 34 with just a half minute on the clock. And on the first play of this possession, Watson hits peak, he picks up 27, and now they're in Alabama territory. And then the thing about this, though, they ended up with some confusion here that they had it where Sweeney was upset that the clock would not stop. Actually, it was on the 2 plays later. First on 1st down from the 39, they picked up 2 yards. And then on 2nd and 8 from the 37, Watson goes to Brooks, and he picks up 11 yards. And the clock doesn't stop, so they had to use a timeout, whereas the clock should have stopped with the first down. And so instead of being able to get another playoff, they had to settle for a field goal attempt with just seconds left. So they had the ball now on the Alabama 26, and it was blocked. A 44-yard attempt blocked by Petway. And so they blocked the field goal. It remains 14-14 as Alabama would end up taking the first half to a close with a 12-yard run by Henry, and that would do it for the first half. But at halftime, in the tunnel, Sweeney was very upset, and he was yelling at the officials for that clock management by the officiating staff. So the referees making a mistake here, costing Clemson a potential play. You know, they would have took a shot at the end zone, and said they end up lining up for the field goal, and it gets blocked. But it was a tie game at this point. So now 14-14, starting up the second half. Clemson would get the ball first, and coming out of the locker rooms, they would get shut down. The Tide would force them to a 3-and-out on their first possession of the second half. So now Alabama would take over on their own 36 after the punt. And on 2nd and 6 from the 40, Coker goes to Drake. He picks up 7 yards. Now it's first down at the Alabama 47. And then Jake Coker to O.J. Howard for a 53-yard touchdown. Adam Griffith adds the extra point. And now the Tide are back in the lead, 21-14, with still 13 minutes left in the third. So now Clemson would take over after the touchback on the kickoff on their own 25. They started moving the ball up towards midfield, and they got into Alabama territory with a 22-yard reception by Brooks on a 2nd and 10 from the 38 that brought the ball to the Alabama 40. Then on 2nd and 6 from the 36, a penalty for pass interference would make it a first down at the Alabama 21 for the Tigers. but they would not get past the 20, as that's where their drive would end up stalling after a couple of incomplete passes, and out would come Huegel to attempt a 37-yard field goal. It was up, it was good, and it was now 21-17 as Clemson cut Bama's lead to 4 with about 10 minutes still left in the third. So now the Tide would take over on their own 26 after the kickoff, and on first down, Coker was sacked by Kevin Dodd as he sacks him yet again. There's actually a holding penalty against the offense, but it was declined, and the Tide would go 3 and out on this possession, and they would punt the ball to Clemson, who would take over on their own 40 with a little over 8 minutes still left in the third. And on the first play of this possession, Watson runs it 20 yards for the first down to the Alabama 40. Then Watson goes to Leggett for an 11-yard pass to the 29 for a first down. Then after a penalty on second down, they would repeat the down, but Watson would pick up 16 yards on a 2nd and 15 from the 34 to bring the ball into the red zone at the 18. Then on 2nd and 6 from the 14, Watson hit Gallman. He picked up 8 in the first down at the 6 to make it 1st and goal. Watson runs for 5 yards to bring it up to the 1-yard line, and after a run for no gain on 2nd and goal, Wayne Gallman scores on a 1-yard touchdown on 3rd and goal. Huegel kicks the extra point, and now the Tigers were back in the lead, up 24-21, with a little under 5 minutes still left in the third quarter. So now Alabama would get the ball on their own 17 after the kickoff by Clemson, and they would get a first down, but then their drive would end up stalling at the 37, so they would end up punting the ball after 5 plays on this possession. So now Clemson would take over on their own 38 after the punt, and on 3rd and 6 from the 42, Watson went to Leggett for a 10-yard reception. That made it a first down in Alabama territory at the 48, but their drive would end up stalling when on 3rd and 8 from the 46, Watson was sacked by Evans. He dropped him for an 11-yard loss. That made it 4th and 19, and so the Tigers would end up punting after 6 plays on this possession. So now Alabama would take over with about a half a minute left still in the third, backed up against their own end zone with the ball on their own 5-yard line. Henry would bring them out of the shadow of the end zone with a 5-yard run, then followed by a 2-yard run as the third quarter came to a close. So 24-21 after 3, and to open up the fourth quarter, it was 3rd and 3 on the 12, but an incomplete pass would make it a 3 and out on the possession for the Tide. So they would punt the ball to Clemson, who would now take over on the 50-yard line, and they would quickly get into Bama territory, but after 4 plays on the possession, they would end up punting as their drive stalled at the Alabama 40. So now Alabama would take over on their own 20 after the punt, and on the first play of this possession, Coker hits Stewart for a 25-yard reception. Now it's a first down at the Alabama 45. Then on 3rd and 11 from the 44, Coker goes back to Stewart and he picks up 38 yards. What a catch by Stewart. And now it was a first down for the Tide in the red zone at the Clemson 18-yard line. They were then faced with a 3rd and 8 and a second incomplete pass after an incomplete pass on second down would set up a 33-yard field goal by Griffith on 4th and 8 from the 16, and he knocks it through the uprights, and this game is tied at 24 apiece with 10.5 left in regulation. So now, on the kickoff, Alabama shocks everybody. They go for an onside kick, and it was a perfect onside kick. It was just beautiful the way it landed right into the Alabama's hands. A good job there by the kicker, by Adam Griffith. And so Sweeney was very upset about that, as they actually let them run with the ball. You're not supposed to do that, and there was some question as whether, he'd crossed the line, but it was as close as could be. It was very good timing, and the onside kick would stand, and they would end up placing the ball on the 50-yard line. Then after a 1-yard loss on first down, 2nd and 11 from the 49, Jake Coker gets it to O.J. Howard, somewhat like a screen pass, and Howard somehow finds the seam down the sideline and takes off 51 yards for the touchdown. O.J. Howard. Adam Griffith adds the extra point, and now the Tide were in the lead 31-24 with less than 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter. So quite a play there. The onside kick, the trickery on special teams leads to a touchdown just 2 plays later. And now after the kickoff, and they actually kicked off this time, no onside kick, they kick it off to Clemson. It's a touchback, and now Clemson takes over on their own 25, and it seemed as if momentum had kind of shifted at this point, but Clemson kept on fighting. They did not give up. They fought all the way to the end. Starting off right here, they bounced right back. On the first play of this possession, Watson goes to Renfrow. He picks up 24 yards and a first down at the 49. And then Wayne Gallman, a 34-yard run, brings it into the red zone. So just 2 plays later, they're already in the red zone after 2 plays on this possession. They would then be faced with a 2nd and 13, and a complete pass to Renfrow from Watson for 6 yards brings up 3rd and 7, and then an incomplete pass, and out would come the field goal unit as they would be forced to attempt a 31-yard field goal as their drive stalled there on the 14. It was up, it was good, and that made it once again a 4-point game with the score 31-27 as Clemson trailed Bama with just under 8 minutes left to play in this game. So now they would kick the ball off to the Tide, and on the kickoff, Kenyan Drake goes 95 yards for the touchdown as he dives for it at the end. He made some nice moves, avoiding a tackle early on, and then he avoids the kicker. But then number 15, his name escapes me, made a great effort for Clemson, forcing Drake to have to dive, but he got into the end zone, he broke the plane, it was a touchdown. Griffith adds the extra point, and it was now 38-27. Is now Alabama had scored 2 touchdowns and a field goal in just the last 3+ minutes of this game, as it was tied. Well, first they tied it up as they had trailed by 3, but the field goal to tie it at 24, and then the onside kick, the touchdown, then the field goal by Clemson. Now, the kick return for the touchdown, and it's 38-27 with 7.5 minutes left to play in this game. And if momentum hadn't shifted on that onside kick, you would think surely momentum now had shifted quite a bit, as it was now an 11-point lead for Alabama. Most teams would give up at this point, but not Clemson. Clemson kept their heads in the game. They kept on fighting. They would start on their own 25 after the touchback on the kickoff. Then on 2nd and 11 from the 24, Watson goes to Gallman. He picks up 14 yards and a first down at the 38. And then on 2nd and 13 from the 35, Watson goes back to Gallman. He picks up 39 yards, and now it's a first down in Alabama territory at the 26. They would then be faced with a 3rd and 3 from the 19. Watson goes to Brooks. He picks up 4 yards for the first down in the red zone at the 15. And then Watson goes to Artavis Scott, 15-yard touchdown. And they would go for 2, but they would not get the 2-point conversion, as it ended up with just an incomplete pass there. And so it was 38-33 with under 5 minutes left to play, just over 4.5. It's about 4:40. So a 5-point game now with less than 5 minutes. Now Alabama would take over on their own 25 after the touchback on the kickoff. They would be faced with a 2nd and 12 on the 23, and Jay Coker goes to O.J. Howard, and O.J. Howard goes 63 yards all the way to the Clemson 14. A huge play by Howard, as he made a lot of big plays in this game. But Howard, with that big play right there, would have a first down on the Clemson 14-yard line. And now Derrick Henry would run for 3 yards, setting up 2nd and 7. He ran for another 5 yards. And on 3rd and 2, Jay Coker, on a broken play, ends up running 3 yards for the first down. And so now it's 1st and goal on the 3. And they try to pound it in first with a run by Henry, picks up 2, then Coker gets stopped for no gain. Now it's 3rd and goal on the 1, and Derrick Henry scores with a second effort. Looked like he was stopped at first, but he spun and he extended, and he broke the plane for the 1-yard touchdown. Griffith added the extra point, and it was now 45-33 with just a minute left in this game, just over a minute left in the game. So now that would really do it for Clemson. They would need 2 scores, down by 12 with just over a minute, 67 seconds to be exact left in this game. But they would get the ball on the 32, and like I said all game long, they just would not quit. They kept fighting all the way to the end. You got to respect them for that. So on 2nd and 4 from the Clemson 38, Watson would hit peak. He picked up 28 yards, and now it was a first down in Alabama territory at the 34. Then on 2nd and 10 from the 34, Watson goes back to peak. He picks up 10, and so then he ended up with a first down at the 24. Then on 2nd and 10 from the 24, Watson gets Jordan Leggett for a 24-yard touchdown. And now Huegel adds the extra point, and it's a 5-point game with the score Alabama 45, Clemson 40. But there's just 12 seconds left on the clock. So now Clemson would have to attempt to do what Bama had done earlier in the quarter with the onside kick. But they would not have success on the onside kick as Alabama recovers. And all that was left to do was take a knee in the victory formation as the Crimson Tide are once again national champions. That's 4 out of 7 years. That's the 5th national championship for Nick Saban. He had 1 with LSU, 4 now with Alabama, as he is now 2nd all-time for coaches in terms of national championships. And that's the 11th national championship for Alabama, going back to, I believe, 32. But in this game, a lot of offense, a lot more offense than I expected to see. I thought it'd be a lower scoring game with these defenses, but 85 total points scored between the two. And in that fourth quarter, 24-16. So they ended up putting up 40 points in the fourth quarter alone. And even it was 24-9 before that touchdown right there at the end. Of course, at that point, the game was pretty much over. But you got to give it to Clemson that they kept fighting to the end. But Bama was just too much for them. And that was the thing. Bama also, they get that onside kick. And it seems like momentum's going their way right there as they shift it. But then Clemson comes right back. But then Alabama, they come right back with that kick return for the touchdown. And that's the thing is, when momentum starts shifting your way, but then the other team fires right back, it's tough to keep on rolling. But the Tide kept on rolling. They rolled and they rolled. So let's look at the numbers in this game. And for Jake Coker, 16-25, 335 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Derrick Henry had 36 carries for 158 yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. O.J. Howard, 5 receptions for 208 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Artavis Scott, 2 receptions for 63 yards. And also Eddie Jackson with that interception, and Kenyan Drake, 5 kick returns for 196 yards, including that 95-yard touchdown on that kick return that really sealed the deal in this game. Of course, Clemson just kept on coming right back, and Deshaun Watson, what a performance. Nearly 500 total yards as he was 30 for 47, 405 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, and he had 20 carries for 73 rushing yards. So 478 total yards for Watson. And Wayne Gallman, 14 carries for 45 yards and a touchdown. And Sharon Peak, 6 receptions for 99 yards. Hunter Renfrow, 7 catches for 88 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jordan Leggett, 5 catches for 78 yards and a touchdown. Gallman also had 3 catches for 61 yards as he ended up with a total of 106 yards in this game. Zach Brooks, 4 catches for 39 yards, and Artavis Scott, 4 catches for 33 yards and a touchdown for Clemson. And of course, also their defense, they were getting the sacks. And Kevin Dodd, as he had 5 tackles for losses in this game. He also had a couple sacks. Shaq Lawson had a couple sacks as well. as there were some really big performances on both teams. It was an excellent game, fun to watch for sure. We look at the team stats. 31 first downs for Clemson, just 18 first downs for Alabama. But on third down, the Tide were 9 for 18. That's 50% conversion rate for Alabama. Clemson 6 for 14. That's 42% conversion rate for the Tigers. Let me look at the total yards. 550 for Clemson, 473 for Alabama. Through the air, Clemson had 405 yards, 335 yards for Alabama. Of course, the one interception thrown there by Watson, as Eddie Jackson came up with that one. But on the ground, Clemson had 145 rushing yards, 138 rushing yards for Alabama, as Clemson actually averaged 3.8 to Bama's 3. And then we look at the penalties. Very few penalties in this game. 4 penalties against Clemson for 27 yards. 2 penalties against Alabama for 21 yards. And then the time of possession, 30 minutes, 31 seconds for Alabama. 29 minutes, 29 seconds for Clemson. About as close as it could be. And, the final score, 45-40. It wasn't quite as close there as Alabama had really taken control, up by 12 before Clemson ends up scoring that touchdown there in the final minute. But still, that was, you gotta give Clemson credit. They played all the way to the end. They never gave up. There were a few moments in that fourth quarter where most teams would have just been done. Usually when the onside kick happens and then the score there, that does it for most teams. And especially once the kick return happened, most teams would just lay down and just it's over. But they fought all the way to the end. They did not give up. And then even to put themselves in a situation with less than a half minute left, scoring that touchdown, and then going for that onside kick, they would have needed a miracle. But still, you got to give them credit for the fact that they fought so hard. But Alabama, just amazing, huge performances all around on both sides of the ball, and especially O.J. Howard. What a game. Also, Jake Coker and Derrick Henry, 3 big performances right there by Alabama. And, of course, Lane Kiffin and Nick Saban getting the championship. Kiffin coming on as offensive coordinator, of course, formerly a coach in the NFL and in college, they're USC most recently. But Alabama, the Tide, win again in an exciting game, an exciting fourth quarter. But let me know what you think in the comments section below. Definitely interested to read your thoughts and opinions. Thank you very much for listening. It is greatly appreciated. I really hope you had a great weekend and are having a great day, and have a great week, and enjoy all the sports.